Welcome back. In a moment, we'll be speaking with the former British ambassador to Egypt, James Watt. First, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. Researchers have found soaring rates of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis in 8 West African countries. Almost a quarter of TB patients carry strains that are resistant to prescriptions, which raises the possibility of a major public health threat. Pakistan has accused 8 Indian diplomats of espionage and terrorism. The government stopped short of expelling the embassy officials. This move is the latest tense encounter between the nuclear-armed rivals as relations between the two countries worsens. And the Indian government is conducting emergency talks as pollution levels have reached devastating heights in New Delhi. The city woke up to the worst spell of smog in 17 years. Experts saying the situation should be now treated as an emergency and an effort should be made to protect children and the old. Well, back now to our discussion of the political situation in Egypt, and we're joined here in the studio by the former British ambassador to Egypt from 2011 until 2014, James Watt. Thanks for being with us. Egypt is short of money, quite a bit short of money.
They're certainly short of foreign exchange. There's a dollar crisis which is reflected in the parallel market for black market dollars. And that is what they're trying to close now. There are several attempts being made to close it. And the IMF agreement, which, as you know, was initialed in August and which is due now to be concluded in Washington, should provide a major boost in terms of dollar lending to enable the central bank to get going again.
But there's a but there, isn't it? There was some criteria the IMF laid out. They don't seem close to meeting those criteria yet.
It's very difficult. They've made some progress. They brought in a VAT law, for example, although the application hasn't really got into gear yet, I think. They need to raise another $6 billion of bilateral loans from other friends, particularly we think of the Gulf. That seems to have been negotiated, but again, nobody is quite clear about that. Yes, there are a number of conditions.
Why is it that Egypt can't produce enough? What's wrong with its GDP?
Egypt has a very diverse economy. It's got manufacturing, it's got agriculture, it's got the Suez Canal revenues, tourism, services, construction. Quite a lot of money comes from remittances from abroad. But almost all those sectors have suffered in one way or another over the last few years. Firstly, from the major disruption which happened in 2011 to 13. But, for example, tourism has suffered from that, but also from the downing by a terrorist bomb of a Russian tourist airliner taking off from Sharm el-Sheikh September last year, which has left the tourism industry in even worse state than before. It really should recover. It deserves to recover, I think.
And yet, we think of Egypt as a great tourist destination,
It
don't
is.
we?
It's a wonderful tourist
wonderful
destination.
exploration of the Nile, you've got the pyramids, and then the new resort of Sharm el-Sheikh has had a very loyal clientele up until, well, you were there.
Yes. Well, Sharm el-Sheikh is protected by a very strong perimeter, which even hardest judges will consider to be pretty good against terrorist infiltration. The problem a year ago was, of course, that something went wrong with airport security. So people are perfectly safe in Sharm el-Sheikh. I think a huge amount has been done for airport security, and they should be feeling perfectly safe now. But only a few countries have agreed to let their airlines fly back into Sharm el-Sheikh.
Can we wind back to 2011 when you took up the post? As the years rolled by, you saw this phenomenon of what certainly in the West was dubbed the Arab Spring. I don't know if it was necessarily seen as that. And it sort of started on the North African coast and started rolling inexorably further eastwards. What did you think of the time? We
were very much in favor of the values of that uprising, revolt, revolution being respected and seeing them prevail. We could see that there would be a huge amount of pushback, which there was. In Egypt, for example, the state, which is used to controlling everything, used to being a very strong state, was rattled by these scenes on the street. It wasn't totally unresponsive. There were people within the top ranks of the Egyptian security state who really saw the value of going down a democratic path. And
those in favour?
There were some who
could they express that opinion, that those in favour, or would they be?
Well, in effect, elections were scheduled in November 2011. They lasted for a couple of months. through to January 2012, and they were reasonably fair. And the winning party, of course, was the best organized party, the Muslim Brotherhood, but also the Salafists, another variety, if you like, of political Islamists, also came on very strongly and picked up a lot of seats. So, yes, by the beginning of 2012, we had a parliament which had been elected. It wasn't at all what the people in power would have liked to see, but they let it be. In June 2012, there were presidential elections. There was a runoff between two candidates, one coming from a military background and the other a Muslim Brotherhood candidate. And by a very narrow majority, but in a clean vote, the Muslim Brotherhood candidate won, became President Morsi. And again, the security authorities let that be, and they pledged allegiance. It was very interesting that the commander-in-chief of the army, the most senior officer in the army, that is, actually announced that from now on, the president would be the commander-in-chief. Mm. This was in August, September 2012, when everybody was making a huge effort to really make democracy work and respect the choice of the people.
But what was it like for you as a British, political appointee? So you've seen the way it works back in Britain and other Western democracies and so on. This ideal slowly, well, not slowly, actually quite dramatically falling by the wayside.
Oh, it was very, very distressing to see the way that a lot of the hopes and almost implied promises of the early part of the uprising, the revolution, were being turned on their head.
But you're impotent to do much about it, right? Because your role is just to observe and to liaise with London.
Well, Britain is a friend of Egypt's, as Egypt has many friends, and we all wanted Egypt to get through this difficult transition well and come out well.
An influential friend?
Nobody is hugely influential in Egypt. Nobody is huge. It's a very big country. It has its own momentum, its own institutions, its own political style. You have to know when to try to exert a little bit of influence. No, I wouldn't say pressure, just
skill of the
advice.
Let's spin forward, shall we, to now, because if we try and problem solve now. Interesting to note the relations between Egypt and Israel appear to be on a new friendship track. Perhaps talk of Netanyahu, el-Sisi meeting, maybe visiting each other, speaking to each other's parliaments and so on. What do you read into that dynamic?
Well, there's always been, for many decades now, there's been a very pragmatic security relationship between Egypt and Israel, and particularly in handling what both countries regarded as a danger from Palestinian terrorism, but in fact resulting in the almost complete enclosure of Gaza, which is something that nobody approves of at all. And but there's been this cooperation. When the uprising, the rebellion, the revolution happened in early 2013, there was a lot of popular sentiment expressed against Israel. And this somehow was tied up also with the Muslim Brotherhood and with kind of political Islamist ideas. And the authorities quite rightly tried to tamp that down and keep it calm. But there's no denying there is a very strong popular mood against Israel because what they see is Israeli policy towards Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem. So, but the security services then kind of reinforced their cooperation, I think, with the events of 2013 when the government of President Morsi was overthrown and a new government was imposed. Then I think the cooperation became clearer and stronger.
And the Sinai is now a problem, I suppose, for both. And do we throw Saudi Arabia into the mix as well, who might be forming in what some people might think an unlikely triangular relationship?
I think the Saudis are being very pragmatic also now in their relationship with Israel. I'm sure they haven't changed their essential positions on the rights of Muslim access to Muslim holy places in Jerusalem and other, and indeed all of us agree on the need for the Palestinians to be given their right to achieve their independent state.
And, well, is it too much of an extrapolation to say that Saudi Arabia and Egypt could be instrumental in bringing some kind of better solution between Israel and Palestine, or the Palestinians?
That would be great.
At some point down the track, or
at some point. I don't think it's high on the agenda of either one at the moment. It would be very good to achieve, but actually both of them have more pressing concerns. Saudi is more concerned with Syria and with Yemen and with Iran, and Egypt is concerned with its own internal political difficulties, its own economic difficulties more than political.
So, although it's a rather, perhaps it's too glib an expression to say that the whole of the Middle East, if you sort Israel-Palestine, you sort everything. That's a naive remark, isn't it? It's more complicated than that.
It's still valid. It wouldn't solve everything now, but everybody has always pointed out that, this is one of the underlying causes of the resentment and the hostility and the extremism. The fact that there hasn't been a just solution to the Palestinian question with the Palestinians being given their rights. I think we could all do with less extremism.
And the influence of Daesh added to the mix now for a problem for many people, particularly perhaps in the Sinai Desert? How does Egypt deal with that, with all these other things in its in tray?
Daesh has kind of marketed its brand a little bit. Where there's an existing group, that group will sometimes want to label itself Daesh and get all the apparent credit you get from that with Daesh supporters and sympathizers. There were active terrorists in Sinai before the invention of Daesh. Yeah. They haven't changed much. I think they're the same ones.
James Watt, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now we end with our Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know. These creations, made out of discarded bullet casing, keys, spoons and machetes, have been leaving admirers at the Kinshasa Art Gallery in the Congo totally inspired. Freddie Simba said he's been surrounded by an abundance of material and inspiration for his pieces due to the African country's brutal past of dictatorship, colonization and successive conflicts. Art lovers see him as part of a select new generation of Congolese artists helping to change the perception of the war-torn country. And that's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.